The flight attendant's tone carried the kind of manufactured politeness that barely concealed contempt. Cold. Clinical. The words hung in the stale cabin air like a verdict. "Miss, I'm going to need you to collect your things and step off the aircraft." 19-year-old Maya Thornton sat frozen in seat 12A, her pulse hammering against her throat. Around her, 100 passengers turned as one, their stares boring into her like accusations itself. This wasn't supposed to be happening. She had checked in online. She had her boarding pass. Her scholarship acceptance letter to Stanford's summer engineering program was folded carefully in her backpack. She had done everything right. But the woman seated beside her in 12B, a stranger with ice blue eyes and a designer scarf knotted tight around her neck, had decided otherwise. Maya was being removed from the plane, humiliated, treated like a threat for the crime of existing in a space someone else believed she didn't belong. What none of them knew, not the flight attendant, not the smug passenger, not the silent crowd of witnesses, was that 10,000 feet above them, circling in a holding pattern, Maya's father was watching. And Marcus Thornton didn't just own a private jet. He owned 3, including the Gulfstream G700 that was about to teach an entire airport what real power looked like. Before we go deeper into this case, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. The morning had started with promise. Denver International Airport hummed with the chaotic rhythm of a Thursday morning. Rolling luggage, final boarding announcements, hurried goodbyes near security checkpoints. Maya Thornton moved through Terminal B with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned her place in the world through relentless work. At 19, she carried herself with a maturity that belied her age. Obitso's well-worn copy of Introduction to Quantum Mechanics peeked from the top of her Navy backpack. Her destination? San Francisco International. From there, a 40-minute drive to Stanford University, where she'd been accepted into one of the most competitive summer research programs in the country. She found a seat near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac, a sprawling landscape of metal and asphalt stretching toward the Rockies in the distance. She pulled out her phone and initiated a video call. The one person she needed to hear before this journey officially began. Marcus Thornton's face filled the screen. Behind him, the glass walls of his penthouse office framed the Denver skyline like a portrait of achievement. He was a man whose presence commanded respect, even through a phone screen, 6'3", broad-shouldered, with eyes that had seen both poverty and power. He'd built Thornton Tech Solutions from nothing, from a garage startup in 5 Points to a billion-dollar empire specializing in cybersecurity software. He'd given Maya every advantage, but he couldn't shield her from a world that still saw her skin before her mind. "There she is," Marcus said, his voice warm and booming. "My future Nobel Prize winner. You ready to show those Silicon Valley kids what a Thornton can do?" Maya laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Dad, it's just a summer program. I'm trying not to get lost on campus my first day." "Just a summer program?" He leaned closer to the camera, his expression softening. "Baby girl, you earned this. You worked harder than anyone I know. You got everything? Your ID? That charger I made you pack?" "Yes, Dad," she said, rolling her eyes with affection. "For the 100th time, I'm good. I'm not 12 anymore." "You'll always be my little girl," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Even when you're running your own tech company and putting your old man out of business." He paused, and his tone shifted, became serious, layered with an unspoken history. "Just stay aware, Maya. Not everyone sees the world the way we do. Not everyone's going to celebrate your brilliance the way they should." It was advice born from experience, from decades of being the only black face in boardrooms. from having his intelligence questioned, his success scrutinized, his very presence treated as an anomaly instead of an inevitability. He'd given Maya the best education money could buy, but he couldn't purchase her a prejudice-free world. "I know, Dad. I'll be smart, I promise." "I love you, honeybee." "I love you more. Now let me go catch this flight so I can change the world." The call ended, leaving Maya with a warmth that settled over her like armor. Her father was her hero, her blueprint for resilience. After grabbing a bottle of water from a kiosk, she joined the boarding queue for Skyward Airlines Flight 407 to San Francisco. Her boarding pass read Seat 12A, a window seat. She couldn't wait to watch the mountains shrink beneath her as she flew toward her future. The line moved slowly. Business travelers in rumpled suits, a young family wrestling a stroller, college kids buzzing with excitement about spring break destinations. Maya kept to herself, her earbuds playing a lo-fi playlist that calmed her pre-flight nerves. When her boarding group was called, she felt a final rush of exhilaration. This was it. Independence. Possibility. The future. She found row 12 and smiled politely at the woman already settled in the aisle seat, 12C. "Excuse me," Maya said, gesturing toward the window. The woman looked to be in her mid-50s, blonde hair styled into a stiff helmet of curls, a strand of pearls at her throat. Her eyes, pale and sharp, swept over Maya's appearance with the efficiency of a scanner. The Howard University hoodie, the leggings, the natural texture of Maya's hair pulled into a high puff. A faint, almost invisible frown creased the woman's lips. She didn't move. "That's my seat," Maya repeated, her smile tightening just slightly. The woman, whose name would later be revealed as Patricia Langford, sighed, a sound of profound inconvenience. "Of course," Patricia muttered, gathering her oversized Chanel bag from the middle seat. She stood, but only partially, forcing Maya to squeeze past her uncomfortably. Their shoulders brushed. Patricia's expression suggested contamination. Maya settled into 12A, her excitement slightly dimmed. She placed her backpack under the seat in front of her and buckled in, turning her attention to the window, to the ground crew choreographing the ballet of departure. She was determined not to let one sour interaction spoil this moment. She was on her way, but she had no idea the turbulence waiting for her before the plane ever left the ground. The Boeing 737 cabin filled quickly. A controlled chaos of passengers hoisting carry-ons into overhead bins, claiming armrests, settling in for the 2-hour flight. Maya, having successfully navigated past Patricia, pulled out her phone for one last scroll through her program materials. Next to her, Patricia had her own phone out, her thumbs moving with frantic purpose. Maya didn't notice. She was too focused on her own anticipation. What she couldn't see was the message Patricia was typing to the flight attendant call button. A complaint, vague but venomous. Uncomfortable situation in 12A. Passenger behavior concerning. Feels unsafe. Patricia pressed send and sat back, her face a mask of righteous concern. Within moments, a flight attendant appeared. Her name tag read Jennifer, mid-30s, tired eyes. The kind of professional weariness that comes from years of navigating passenger complaints and corporate policy. "Is there a problem here?" Jennifer asked, her voice carefully neutral. Patricia leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough for Maya to hear. "I don't feel safe. This girl, she's been acting suspiciously. I saw her looking through her bag multiple times. She seems agitated." Maya's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to remain calm," Jennifer said, her attention shifting to Maya. "I am calm," Maya said, her voice tight. "I haven't done anything. I've been sitting here quietly." "She's being aggressive," Patricia interjected, her voice rising just enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers. "See?" This is exactly what I was talking about. Jennifer's eyes flickered with something Maya couldn't quite read. Doubt? Sympathy? Fear of making the wrong call? "Miss, I'm going to need you to step into the aisle for a moment," Jennifer said. "Why?" Maya's heart was pounding now. "I haven't done anything wrong. It's just a precaution. We need to verify some information." "Verify what?" "I have my boarding pass, my ID. What exactly do you need to verify?" The conversation was drawing stares now. Passengers, craning their necks, whispers spreading like wildfire. Jennifer's jaw tightened. "Miss, you can either cooperate, or I'll have to call security." The threat landed like a slap. Maya felt her throat constrict. She wanted to argue, to demand fairness, to scream that this was discrimination dressed up as protocol. But she also knew how these situations ended for people who looked like her. Compliance was survival. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. Every eye in the cabin was on her, judging, assuming, convicting. Jennifer led her up the aisle toward the front of the plane, toward the jet bridge, toward Humiliation. Behind her, Patricia Langford settled back into her seat with a satisfied smile. The jet bridge felt like a corridor of shame. Maya stood there, trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation, while Jennifer spoke in hushed tones to a supervisor who'd materialized from somewhere in the terminal. His name tag read Stephen Morrison, gate supervisor, mid-40s. The kind of middle management face that existed solely to make other people's problems disappear. "What seems to be the issue?" Stephen asked, his voice carrying the rehearsed sympathy of someone reading from a customer service script. "We received a complaint from a passenger," Jennifer explained. "She expressed concerns about this young woman's behavior." "What behavior?" Maya's voice cracked. "I was sitting in my seat. That's it. That's all I did." Stephen's eyes moved over her with the clinical detachment of an appraiser, taking inventory, making calculations. "Do you have your boarding pass?" Maya pulled it up on her phone, her hands shaking. "Right here. Seat 12A, paid for, confirmed." "And your identification?" She fumbled for her wallet, pulling out her driver's license. Stephen examined it like he was searching for forgery. Finally, he handed it back. "Miss Thornton, we take passenger safety very seriously. When someone raises a concern—" "She didn't raise a concern," Maya interrupted, her voice rising despite her effort to stay calm. "She lied. I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. I was sitting there reading." "I understand you're upset." "Upset?" The word came out sharp. "I'm being removed from a flight I paid for because some woman decided I don't belong there. Do you understand what that feels like?" Stephen's expression hardened. He'd made his decision before this conversation even started. "Miss Thornton, I'm going to have to ask you to deplane. We can rebook you on the next available flight, but you won't be traveling on this one." The finality in his voice was crushing. "This is discrimination," Maya said, her voice breaking. "You know that's what this is." "This is a safety protocol," Stephen countered. "We have every right to remove passengers when concerns are raised." "Concerns based on what? My skin color? The fact that I'm young and black and sitting in a seat someone thinks I can't afford? I'm not going to argue with you. You can either leave voluntarily or I'll call security to escort you out." Tears burned behind Maya's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of these people." "Fine," she whispered. She walked back onto the jet bridge, past the passengers still boarding, their stares following her like accusations. She found a seat in the terminal near the gate and pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She didn't want to call her father, didn't want to admit that his warnings had come true, didn't want him to see her like this, defeated, but she needed him. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Maya? Baby, what's wrong? You should be in the air by now." And then the dam broke. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over as she told him everything. The woman, the complaint, the removal, the humiliation. On the other end of the line, Marcus Thornton's silence was more terrifying than any shout. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, dangerously calm. "What airline, Maya?" "Dad, it's fine. I'll just—" "What airline?" "Skyward. Flight 407. "What gate?" "B17. Stay right there. Don't move. I'm handling this." "Dad, what are you going to—" But he'd already hung up. 10,000 feet above Denver, Marcus Thornton sat in the leather captain's chair of his Gulfstream G700, the crown jewel of his private aviation fleet. He'd been en route to a board meeting in Seattle when Maya's call came through. The moment he heard the tremor in her voice, nothing else mattered. He turned to his pilot, James Carr, a former Air Force captain with 20 years of experience and nerves of steel. "James, change of plans. We're going back to Denver, now." James glanced back, confused. "Sir, we're already halfway to—" "I don't care. Turn this aircraft around. And when we get there, I want you to request priority clearance. We're landing on runway 34 left." James's eyes widened. "Sir, that's the same runway Skyward uses for their departures. We'd be—" "I know exactly what we'd be doing. Make the request." James had worked for Marcus long enough to know when not to ask questions. He contacted Denver ATC. "Denver Tower, this is November the 7-3. Tango Mike requesting immediate return and priority landing on runway 34 left." The controller's voice crackled through. "November 7-3 Tango Mike. That runway is currently active for commercial departures. We can offer you runway 16. Negative, Tower. We require 34 left. This is a priority situation." There was a pause. Then, "November 7-3 Tango Mike. State the nature of your priority." Marcus leaned forward and took the radio himself. His voice was calm, measured, and absolutely unyielding. "Denver Tower, this is Marcus Thornton, owner and pilot in command of this aircraft. My daughter was just illegally removed from Skyward Flight 407, currently preparing for departure on your on-field. I am invoking my rights under FAA regulations to land on the runway of my choosing. We will be on runway 34 left in 12 minutes. I suggest you hold all departures until we're on the ground." Another pause, longer this time. "November 7-3 Tango Mike. Stand by." Marcus didn't wait for a response. He handed the radio back to James and pulled out his phone. He made 3 calls in rapid succession. First, to his attorney, Michael Chen, one of the most feared civil rights lawyers in the country. "Michael, I need you to file an emergency injunction against Skyward Airlines. Discrimination, unlawful removal. I want every flight they have grounded until this is resolved." Second, to his head of security, former Secret Service agent Diane Foster. "Diane, I need you at Denver International in 20 minutes. Gate B17. My daughter was removed from a flight. I want footage. I want names. I want everything." Third, to his publicist, Rachel Nguyen. "Rachel, prepare a statement. Skyward Airlines just made the biggest mistake of their corporate existence. I want every news outlet in the country ready to cover this story by tonight." Each person on the other end knew better than to question him. Marcus Thornton didn't make idle threats. When he moved, the world shifted. Back at Gate B17, Maya sat with her arms wrapped around herself, watching through the window as the ground crew prepared Flight 407 for departure. Passengers were still boarding. The jet bridge was still attached. Patricia Langford was still sitting comfortably in seat 12C, probably congratulating herself. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Stay where you are. Justice is coming." She didn't know what that meant, but she trusted him. Across the terminal, Stephen Morrison was back at the gate desk, processing the final boarding documents. His radio crackled. "Gate B-17, this is Tower. We have a situation. You need to hold Flight 407. Do not push back. Repeat, do not push back." Stephen frowned. "Tower, we're ready for departure. What's the issue?" "We have an aircraft requesting priority landing on your departure runway. You're going to be delayed." "How long?" "Undetermined. Stand by for further instructions." Stephen cursed under his breath and picked up the gate phone to inform the cockpit. The pilots were not happy. Neither were the passengers, who were now being told there would be a delay for air traffic reasons. Maya watched all of this unfold, confused. What was happening? Then she saw it. Through the terminal windows, descending through the clouds like a bird of prey, was a private jet. Sleek, massive, moving with purpose. The Gulfstream G700 touched down on runway 34 left with the precision of a military operation. It didn't taxi to the private aviation terminal. Instead, it rolled to a stop directly in the center of the runway, blocking it completely. No commercial flight could depart. Not until Marcus Thornton decided to move. Maya's phone rang. Her father. "Look out the window, baby girl." She did. And then she understood. Her father hadn't just come back for her. He'd brought an entire airport to its knees. Chaos erupted across Denver International Airport with the efficiency of a wildfire meeting gasoline. Air traffic control lit up like a Christmas tree. Every controller in the tower was suddenly screaming into their headsets, trying to understand why a private Gulfstream had just parked itself in the middle of the busiest commercial departure runway during peak morning hours. Departure slots backed up instantly. 16 flights scheduled to leave within the next 30 minutes were now stuck at their gates. Pilots demanded explanations. Gate agents scrambled for answers. Passengers pressed their faces against terminal windows, phones out, recording everything. At Gate B-17, Stephen Morrison stood frozen behind his desk, watching the unfolding disaster with the dawning horror of a man realizing he'd just stepped on a landmine. His radio erupted with the voice of the tower supervisor. "Gate B-17, be advised the aircraft blocking runway 34 left is registered to Marcus Thornton. We are attempting to establish communication. Stand by." Stephen's face went pale. Marcus Thornton. Everyone in Denver knew that name. Tech billionaire, philanthropist, the man whose face appeared on the covers of business magazines with headlines like "From 5 points to 5 billion" and "The Algorithm King." And Stephen had just kicked his daughter off a plane. The blood drained from his face as the full weight of his catastrophic error settled over him like a collapsing building. Inside the Gulfstream, Marcus sat calmly in the cockpit, watching the pandemonium unfold through the windscreen. His phone was ringing nonstop. Attorneys, executives, reporters who'd somehow already gotten wind of the situation. He ignored all of them. James, his pilot, turned to him with barely concealed anxiety. "Sir, we're getting multiple demands from the tower to vacate the runway immediately. They're threatening emergency response if we don't comply." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Let them threaten. We're not moving until I get what I came for." "And what's that?" "An apology, a reinstatement, and the termination of every employee who touched this situation." James whistled low. "You know this is going to cost us, right? FAA fines, possible legal action." Marcus finally looked at him. "James, do you have children?" "2 daughters, you know that." "Then you understand. There is no price I wouldn't pay, no consequence I wouldn't accept. My daughter was humiliated for existing. That ends today." James nodded slowly. He understood. The radio crackled again. "November 7-3, Tango Mike. This is Denver Tower. You are ordered to vacate runway 34 left immediately. Your current position is creating a safety hazard and disrupting airport operations." Marcus picked up the radio. Huma himself. His voice was calm, clear and utterly inflexible. "Denver Tower, this is Marcus Thornton. I will vacate this runway when Skyward Airlines reinstates my daughter on Flight 407 with a full apology and compensates her for the discrimination she experienced. Until then, I'm not moving. You can send Airport Police, TSA, the National Guard for all I care. This aircraft stays put." The tower went silent. Marcus hung up the radio and made another call, this time to the CEO of Skyward Airlines, Gregory Whitmore. It went straight to voicemail. Marcus wasn't surprised. Whitmore was probably in a conference room somewhere being briefed on the situation by panicked executives. Marcus left a message, short, direct. "Greg, this is Marcus Thornton. Your employees just racially profiled and removed my 19-year-old daughter from Flight 407 at Denver International. I've got my Gulfstream parked on your departure runway, and it's staying there until you fix this. Clock's ticking. Every minute you wait costs your company money, reputation, and market value. Call me back." He ended the call and opened his laptop. Within seconds, he'd pulled up Skyward's stock ticker. It was already starting to dip as news of the runway blockage hit trading algorithms. Social media was exploding. Passengers on delayed flights were posting videos and outrage commentary. The hashtag Skyward Shame was trending nationally. Marcus allowed himself the smallest smile. Sometimes power wasn't about violence, it was about leverage, and right now, he had all of it. Back in the terminal, Maya watched the spectacle unfold with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Her father had actually done it. He'd brought an entire airport to a standstill. For her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Jordan. "OMG, Maya. Are you seeing this? Someone blocked a runway at Denver, and Twitter is saying it's about a girl who got kicked off a Skyward flight. Is that you?" Maya didn't respond. She couldn't find the words. A commotion at the gate desk drew her attention. Stephen Morrison was on the phone, his face red, gesturing frantically. Beside him, Jennifer, the flight attendant, looked like she was about to cry. Other Skyward employees had gathered around, all of them staring at their tablets and phones with expressions of escalating panic. Then Stephen's eyes found Maya. He hung up the phone and approached her, his hands raised in a gesture of peace that looked more like surrender. "Miss Thornton," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "there's been a misunderstanding. We'd like to invite you back onto Flight 407. With our sincerest apologies." Maya stared at him. "A misunderstanding?" "Yes. We made an error in judgment. We should never have asked you to deplane. We deeply regret." "You regret getting caught," Maya interrupted. Her voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. "You regret that my father has enough power to hold you accountable. But you don't regret what you did. Because if I were anyone else, anyone without resources, without a parent who could fight back, I'd still be sitting here, and you'd still be congratulating yourself for following protocol." Stephen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I don't want your apology," Maya continued, "because it's not real. It's damage control." Before Stephen could respond, 2 airport security officers approached, followed by a woman in a sharp business suit. She introduced herself as Amanda Pierce, the airport's director of operations. "Miss Thornton," Amanda said, her voice calm and professional, "I want to personally apologize for what happened to you today. This is unacceptable, and we're taking immediate steps to address it. I've been in contact with your father, and we'd like to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Maya's situation is one that thousands face without cameras rolling, without power to fight back. What would you do if you witnessed something like this happening to someone at your gate?" Maya shook her head slowly. I'm not the one blocking the runway. My father is. You'll need to talk to him. We're trying, but he's not answering our calls. Maybe that should tell you something." Amanda's professional mask slipped just slightly, revealing the desperation underneath. "Miss Thornton, please. We have 16 flights backed up, hundreds of passengers. If this continues—" "If this continues," Maya said, her voice hardening, "maybe your airline will think twice before doing this to someone else." She turned away from them and pulled out her phone, dialing her father. He answered immediately. "You okay, baby girl?" "I'm fine, Dad. They want to talk to you. They're freaking out." "Good. Let them freak out. Are you ready to get back on that plane?" Maya hesitated. The thought of walking back down that aisle, past Patricia Langford, past all those judging eyes. "I don't know if I want to," she admitted. "I don't know if I can face them." "Then don't," Marcus said simply. "You don't owe them anything. We'll get you on the next flight. Or I'll fly you to Stanford myself. Whatever you want. But what about— Let me worry about the rest. Right now, you tell me what you need." Maya closed her eyes. She thought about Patricia Langford sitting comfortably in seat 12B, probably annoyed about the delay, but otherwise unbothered by the damage she'd caused. She thought about Jennifer and Stephen, who'd chosen policy over humanity. She thought about every other young black woman who'd sat in a seat and been made to feel like she didn't belong. When she opened her eyes, her decision was clear. "I want back on that flight," she said. "I want to sit in my seat. And I want everyone who did this to have to watch me fly." Marcus's pride radiated through the phone. "That's my girl. Give me, mighty 15 minutes. Marcus Thornton's phone rang exactly 3 minutes after he hung up with Maya. The caller ID read, "Gregory Whitmore, CEO, Skyward Airlines." Marcus let it ring 4 times before answering. Let him sweat. "Greg," Marcus said, his voice pleasant, almost friendly, the tone of a man who held all the cards and knew it. "Marcus, please." Gregory's voice was strained, desperate. "We need to resolve this. You're causing—" "I'm causing chaos?" Marcus interrupted. "No, Greg. Your employees caused this when they racially profiled my daughter and threw her off a plane for the crime of existing while black. I'm just making sure you experience some consequences. I understand you're upset." "Upset?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not upset, Greg. I'm deliberate. There's a difference. Now here's how this is going to work. You're going to meet me at Gate B17 in the next 10 minutes. Personally. Not a deputy, not an assistant. You're going to apologize to my daughter in front of every passenger on that flight. You're going to reinstate her with an upgrade to first class. And you're going to terminate every employee involved in this decision. Marcus, I can't just— Yes, you can. And you will. Because every minute I sit on this runway costs you approximately $200,000 in delayed departures, missed connections, and operational disruptions. That's not even counting the stock price hemorrhaging happening as we speak. How much has Skyward lost in market cap in the last 20 minutes, Greg? 100 million? 200? There was silence on the other end. Marcus could practically hear the mental calculations. "Or," Marcus continued, his voice dropping lower, "I can move my aircraft right now. I can let you save face. I can even issue a statement about how Skyward handled this with professionalism and grace. But only if you meet my terms, all of them, non-negotiable." Another pause. Then quietly, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. 10, Marcus corrected. And Greg, if I see one reporter, one camera, one attempt to spin this before my daughter is back on that plane safely, I will make it my personal mission to ensure Skyward Airlines becomes a case study in business schools about how to destroy a company in 24 hours. Are we clear?" "Crystal." Marcus hung up and immediately called his attorney. "Michael, I need an NDA drafted in the next 5 minutes. Skyward's CEO is about to agree to some terms. I want everything documented and legally binding before I move this jet." "Already done," Michael replied. "I anticipated this. I'll have it to you in 2 minutes. This is why I pay you obscene amounts of money. That and my winning personality." Marcus ended the call and turned to James. "Fire up the engines. We're about to move, but not yet." James nodded and began the pre-taxi checklist. Through the windscreen, they could see airport vehicles gathering at a distance. Airport police, emergency response teams, news vans that had somehow already arrived despite the lockdown on media. This was going to be a spectacle whether Marcus wanted it to be or not. His phone buzzed. A message from Diane Foster, his head of security. "At the gate. I've got footage from 6 different angles. Security cameras, passenger phones, everything. Jennifer Marks, flight attendant. Stephen Morrison, supervisor. Patricia Langford, complainant. All documented. Legal will have a field day with this." Marcus smiled. Diane was thorough. It's why he'd hired her. Another message, this one from Rachel, his publicist. "CNN, NBC, FOX. Everyone's calling. Do we break the story now or wait?" Marcus typed back quickly. "Wait. Let Skyward spin their wheels first. Then we drop the hammer." He was playing chess while they were playing checkers. At Gate B-17, the atmosphere had shifted from confusion to full-blown crisis management. Amanda Pierce, the airport director, had cordoned off the gate area. Airport police stood at strategic positions, more to manage the growing crowd of curious onlookers than to provide actual security. Passengers from the delayed flight pressed against the windows, filming everything on their phones. Some were angry about the delay. Others were riveted by the unfolding drama. Maya sat in the same seat she'd been in before, but now Diane Foster stood beside her, a presence that radiated competence and quiet menace. Diane had handed Maya a bottle of water and a granola bar, then positioned herself between Maya and the rest of the terminal like a human shield. "You doing okay?" Diane asked quietly. Maya nodded. "Is this really happening?" "Honey, your daddy just shut down one of the busiest airports in the country. Yeah, this is really happening." A commotion at the far end of the terminal announced the arrival of Gregory Whitmore. He moved through the crowd with the harried urgency of a man whose entire professional life was imploding in real time. Mid-50s, silver hair, a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But right now, he looked like a defendant approaching the bench. He spotted Maya and made a beeline toward her. Stephen Morrison tried to intercept him, probably hoping to brief him first, but Gregory brushed past him without a glance. When he reached Maya, he stopped, and for a long moment, he just looked at her. Really looked at her. Perhaps seeing her as a human being for the first time instead of a line item in a crisis management report. "Miss Thornton," he began, his voice quieter than she expected, "I owe you an apology. What happened to you today was wrong, inexcusable, and I am deeply, truly sorry." Maya studied him, looking for sincerity, looking for the performance underneath. "Are you sorry it happened?" she asked carefully, "or sorry you got caught?" The question landed like a punch. Gregory flinched. "Both," he admitted after a moment. "I'd like to tell you I'm only sorry for the former, but that would be a lie. This situation has cost my company dearly, but that doesn't make what happened to you any less reprehensible." It was, perhaps, the most honest thing he could have said. "I've spoken with your father," Gregory continued, "and I've agreed to his terms. You're reinstated on Flight 407. First-class seat, full compensation for your experience. And effective immediately, Jennifer Marks and Stephen Morrison are no longer employed by Skyward Airlines. Maya's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that. Terminations. Real consequences. Gregory turned to address the crowd of passengers who'd gathered, drawn by the spectacle. "I want everyone here to understand," he said, raising his voice so it carried across the gate area. "What happened to Miss Thornton today represents a failure of our values, our training, and our commitment to treating every passenger with dignity and respect. Skyward Airlines failed her. I failed her. And I'm committed to ensuring this never happens again." It was a good speech, probably written by a PR team in a panic, but delivered with enough genuine remorse that it almost felt real. He turned back to Maya. "If you're willing, we'd like to reboard you now. The flight crew has been briefed. You'll be treated with the respect you should have received from the beginning." Maya looked at Diane, who gave her a subtle nod. Then she looked past Gregory to the jet bridge, where the Boeing 737 waited, where Patricia Langford sat, where judgment and humiliation had lived just 30 minutes ago. She stood up. "I have one condition," Maya said. Gregory looked wary. "What's that?" "I want to walk onto that plane and have everyone see me. I want them to see what they did. And I want the woman who started this, Patricia Langford, to look me in the eye when I sit down." Gregory's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Done." The walk down the jet bridge felt different this time. Maya moved, with her head high, Diane Foster one step behind her, a silent guardian angel in a dark suit. Ahead of them, Gregory Whitmore led the way, clearing a path through the chaos. Behind them, passengers whispered and phones recorded every step. This wasn't just a reboarding. This was a statement. The flight crew stood at the aircraft door, a new flight attendant, younger, her smile nervous but genuine. The captain himself had stepped out of the cockpit, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and captain's bars gleaming on his shoulders. "Miss Thornton," he said, extending his hand. "Captain Richard Torres. I want to personally apologize for what you experienced. You have my word. This flight will be handled with the professionalism you deserved from the start." Maya shook his hand. "Thank you. We've upgraded you to seat 2A first class, but I understand you requested to make a statement first?" Maya nodded. The cabin had gone completely silent. Every passenger was watching. Some with curiosity. Some with shame, some with the dawning realization that they'd been complicit through their silence. Maya stepped into the cabin and walked slowly down the aisle, past the business travelers who'd watched her removal without objection, past the college students who'd filmed it for entertainment, past the families who'd turned away to avoid involvement. She reached row 12. Patricia Langford sat in seat 12B, her face a carefully constructed mask of indifference, but her hands, clutching the armrests with white-knuckled intensity, betrayed her. Maya stopped directly beside her row. The entire cabin held its breath. "You don't know me," Maya said, her voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the aircraft. "You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask about my life, my dreams, my reason for being on this flight. You just looked at me and decided I didn't belong." Patricia's mask cracked slightly. She looked away. "I'm 19 years old," Maya continued. "I'm on my way to Stanford University. I have a full scholarship to study engineering. I want to build technology that makes the world better. But you looked at me and saw a threat. Not because of anything I did, but because of what I look like." Someone in the back of the cabin whispered, "Damn." "I could be angry," Maya said. "I am angry, but mostly I'm tired. I'm tired of having to prove I belong in spaces I've earned the right to be in. I'm tired of being treated like a problem for existing, and I'm tired of watching people like you face no consequences for the harm you cause." Patricia finally looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. Whether from shame or self-pity, Maya couldn't tell. Didn't care. "I hope," Maya said quietly, "that one day you understand the weight of what you did. Not because my father could shut down an airport, but because I'm a human being who deserved better." She turned and walked toward the front of the plane, toward seat 2A, toward first class. As she passed, several passengers reached out. A hand on her shoulder whispered apologies. One older black woman who simply mouthed, "Proud of you." Maya settled into her first-class seat, and Diane took the one beside her. Through the window, she could see her father's Gulfstream still sitting on the runway, a monument to power and protection. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "You ready to fly, baby girl?" Maya typed back, "Ready." Seconds later, the Gulfstream's engines roared to life. Slowly, deliberately, the massive private jet began to taxi off the runway, clearing the way for commercial operations to resume. Captain Torres' voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for departure. We apologize for the delay. For those of you wondering about the situation that just unfolded, I want to be clear. Skyward Airlines made a serious mistake today. But because of Miss Thornton's courage and her family's advocacy, we're taking immediate steps to ensure it never happens again. On behalf of the entire crew, thank you for your patience. And Miss Thornton, thank you for giving us the opportunity to do better." Applause broke out across the cabin. Spontaneous, genuine, the kind of moment that restores faith in humanity, even if only briefly. Maya closed her eyes as the plane pushed back from the gate, as they taxied toward the runway. As they lifted into the sky, Denver shrinking beneath them, the mountains rising to meet them. She was flying, finally. But she'd paid a price for her seat that went far beyond money. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in the story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because Maya's experience isn't isolated, it's a pattern, and the question we all have to ask is, what are we doing to break it? The fallout from the Denver runway incident spread faster than wildfire through dry brush. Within 2 hours, every major news outlet in the country was running the story. Cable news devoted entire segments to it. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Skyward Shame. Hashtag Maya Thornton. Hashtag Flying While Black. The video clips that passengers had recorded went viral. Maya's dignified speech in the cabin racked up 15 million views in the first day alone. Civil rights organizations issued statements. Politicians weighed in. The NAACP announced they'd be launching a formal investigation into Skyward Airlines' passenger treatment practices. The Department of Transportation opened an inquiry. For Skyward Airlines, it was a corporate apocalypse. The stock price didn't just dip, it nosedived. In the 72 hours following the incident, the company lost nearly $900 million in market capitalization. Wall Street analysts downgraded the stock from buy to sell, citing catastrophic damage to brand reputation and consumer trust. The hashtag Boycott Skyward was trending globally, with thousands of passengers canceling their reservations and demanding refunds. But the most damaging blow came from an unexpected source: the company's own employees. Flight attendants, pilots, gate agents, hundreds of them, began coming forward with their own stories of discriminatory policies, racial profiling training, and a corporate culture that prioritized passenger comfort over civil rights. Internal emails leaked to the press revealed that Skyward's management had known about these issues for years and had actively chosen to ignore them. One email from a regional manager to corporate leadership was particularly damning. "We've received multiple complaints about our passenger removal protocols disproportionately targeting minority travelers. However, addressing this would require comprehensive retraining and potential litigation exposure. recommend we maintain current policies and handle individual incidents on a case-by-case basis to minimize legal costs. The public response was nuclear. Gregory Whitmore, despite his public apology, was forced to resign within a week. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and installed a crisis management specialist as interim CEO, a woman named Dr. Keisha Williams, who'd made her reputation turning around companies embroiled in discrimination scandals. Her first act was to hold a press conference. Skyward Airlines, she began, her voice firm and unapologetic, has failed in its fundamental duty to treat all passengers with dignity, respect, and equality. What happened to Maya Thornton was not an isolated incident. It was the predictable result of systemic bias embedded in our policies, our training, and our corporate culture. I'm here today to announce that we're tearing it all down and rebuilding from the ground up. She outlined a comprehensive reform plan. Partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative to redesign all employee training programs. Creation of a $50 million fund to compensate passengers who could substantiate discrimination claims from the past 10 years. Implementation of independent oversight to monitor passenger treatment. Mandatory bias training for every employee, from gate agents to executives. Zero tolerance policy for discrimination, with immediate termination for violations. It was radical, unprecedented, and it still might not be enough. Jennifer Marks, the flight attendant who'd removed Maya from the plane, found herself at the center of a social media firestorm. Her name, her photo, her social media accounts, all of it became public. She received death threats. Her home address was leaked online. She couldn't leave her house without being recognized and confronted. In a tearful interview with a local news station, she tried to explain herself. "I was following protocol," she said, her voice breaking. "I received a complaint from a passenger. I'm trained to take those seriously. I never meant to. I didn't think." "You didn't think a black teenager belonged in that seat," the interviewer interrupted. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Jennifer had no answer. Within a month, she'd moved to a different state, changed her name, and disappeared from public life. The internet never forgets, but sometimes people can hide. Stephen Morrison, the gate supervisor, fared slightly better, or worse, depending on perspective. He couldn't find work in the airline industry. The stigma was too great. He ended up taking a job at a warehouse for a third of his previous salary. In interviews, he maintained that he'd done nothing wrong, that he was simply following established procedures. "I was the scapegoat," he told anyone who would listen. "I followed the rules, and they sacrificed me to save face." Perhaps he was right. Perhaps he was wrong. Perhaps it was both. But Patricia Langford, the woman who'd started it all with a lie and a complaint, she faced a different kind of justice. Patricia Langford thought she could disappear into my obscurity. She was wrong. The internet is an unforgiving historian, and it had decided Patricia deserved documentation. Within 48 hours of the incident, amateur digital detectives had identified her. Patricia Ann Langford, 56 years old, resident of Scottsdale, Arizona, member of the Pinehurst Country Club, former PTA president, wife of Richard Langford, senior partner at Langford and Associates, a mid-sized law firm specializing in corporate litigation. Her Facebook profile, LinkedIn account, and Instagram were screenshotted and archived before she could delete them. Old posts resurfaced. Photos from charity galas where she posed with politicians. Comments on news articles where she'd railed against welfare queens and illegal immigrants. A pattern emerged, painted in digital ink. A woman whose prejudice wasn't an aberration, but a lifestyle. The backlash was immediate and merciless. The Pinehurst Country Club quietly asked for her resignation. Due to recent events that conflict with the club's values of inclusivity and respect, read the carefully worded letter that somehow made its way to social media anyway. The PTA she'd once led issued a public statement distancing themselves from her actions. Her husband's law firm issued their own statement. The views and actions of Patricia Langford do not reflect the values of Langford and Associates. We are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in all our practices. Translation: we're cutting ties before she sinks us too. Richard Langford filed for divorce 3 weeks later. Whether from genuine moral outrage or professional self-preservation, the result was the same. Patricia found herself isolated, ostracized, unemployable. She attempted one public statement, posted to a blog that she'd created specifically for this purpose since all her social media accounts had been suspended. I made a mistake. I allowed fear and prejudice to guide my actions, and I deeply regret the pain he caused Maya Thornton. I'm seeking counseling to address my biases and working to become a better person. I hope one day to make amends. The internet responded with a collective. Too little, too late. Patricia Langford became a cautionary tale, a meme, a symbol of what happens when privilege meets accountability. Some people felt the punishment exceeded the crime. Others argued she'd gotten exactly what she deserved. But everyone agreed. Her life as she'd known it was over. Whether that represented justice or revenge depended on who you asked. For Marcus Thornton, the consequences were different, but no less significant. The Federal Aviation Administration didn't take kindly to private aircraft blocking commercial runways, regardless of the moral justification. 2 weeks after the incident, Marcus received official notification. He was being fined $2.3 million for unauthorized use of a commercial runway, creating a safety hazard and disrupting airport operations. His pilot, James Carr, had his license suspended for 6 months pending a full investigation. Marcus accepted both consequences without complaint. He paid the fine in full the same day he received the notice. When reporters asked for his response, he simply said, "Worth every penny." As for James, Marcus called him into his office the day the suspension was announced. "I'm sorry I put you in this position," Marcus said. James shook his head. "Sir, with all due respect, I'd do it again tomorrow. What we did was right." The FAA disagrees. The FAA wasn't watching their daughter get thrown off a plane for being black. Marcus smiled. "During your suspension, you'll be on full salary. And when you're reinstated, you're being promoted to Director of Aviation Operations for all Thornton Tech properties. You'll oversee the entire fleet." James blinked. "Sir, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Loyalty is a two-way street, James. You had my back when it mattered. Now have yours." But Marcus's response didn't stop at accepting consequences. He weaponized his newfound notoriety for systemic change. He announced the creation of the Thornton Initiative for Travel Equality, a nonprofit foundation endowed with an initial $150 million from his personal wealth. Its mission was simple but comprehensive: provide legal representation and financial support to anyone who faced discrimination while traveling. The organization hired a team of civil rights attorneys, established a 24/7 hotline for reporting incidents, and partnered with major advocacy groups to push for federal legislation requiring airlines to report discrimination complaints publicly. Within 6 months, the Thornton Initiative had handled over 300 cases. They'd won settlements totaling $47 million. They'd gotten 12 airline employees fired and forced policy changes at 6 different carriers. Marcus Thornton had taken a personal injury and transformed it into a shield for thousands. In interviews, he was asked repeatedly if he regretted his dramatic response. His answer never changed. "I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it." If you were in Marcus's position, with the resources and the pain of watching your child suffer, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. because this story raises a question we all have to face. How far would we go to protect the people we love? For Maya Thornton, the experience became a defining crucible. The viral videos, the interviews, the think pieces analyzing her speech on the plane. She'd become a symbol overnight, a face for a movement she'd never asked to represent. Stanford's engineering program welcomed her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Professors who'd seen her story in the news approached her after class, offering mentorship. Students whispered when she walked by. Some wanted selfies. Others wanted to debate her father's methods. A few, mostly other students of color, simply nodded in solidarity, understanding what she'd endured without words. The attention was exhausting. Maya gave exactly one long-form interview to a respected journalist from The Atlantic who'd built a career covering race and civil rights. The resulting piece, titled "The Girl Who Stopped an Airport," was nominated for a National Magazine Award. In it, Maya spoke with a clarity that belied her age. People want to make this about my father's money and power. And yes, that played a role. But the real story is how many people this happens to who don't have a billionaire father. How many teenagers? How many adults? How many elderly people are quietly removed from planes, from restaurants, from stores, and have no recourse? The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. And that's what we need to change. The interview went viral. Maya became the reluctant face of a generation demanding accountability. But she didn't let it derail her purpose. She threw herself into her studies with a focus that bordered on obsessive: quantum computing, algorithm design, machine learning. She was brilliant before the incident. Now she was driven by something more than academic curiosity. She saw technology as a tool for justice. In her second semester, she proposed a research project that made her professors pause. An AI system designed to detect and flag discriminatory patterns in customer service interactions. Using natural language processing and bias detection algorithms, the system could analyze complaints, identify racial or ethnic profiling, and alert oversight bodies in real time. It was ambitious, controversial, potentially revolutionary. "Miss Thornton," her advisor said during their first meeting about the project, "you realize this would require access to proprietary data from airlines, hotels, retailers. Companies won't want to participate." Maya smiled. "Then we'll make them want to. Or we'll build it anyway and let the public demand they adopt it." The project became her thesis. She assembled a team of equally passionate students, computer scientists, civil rights advocates, data ethicists. They called it the Equity Lens Protocol. 2 years later, at 21, Maya presented the finished system at a national tech conference. 3 major airlines immediately expressed interest. 2 of them were competitors of Skyward. Marcus, watching from the audience, had tears in his eyes. His daughter had taken her trauma and forged it into innovation. But not everyone celebrated Maya's success. There were the predictable trolls, of course, the anonymous accounts that called her privileged, ungrateful, a race baiter exploiting victimhood. She learned to block, to ignore, to build walls around her mental health. More difficult were the legitimate criticisms. Some civil rights activists argued that Maya's story, because of her father's wealth and influence, obscured the experiences of everyday people who faced discrimination without resources to fight back. They worried that her story would be weaponized by those who wanted to argue that racism was only a problem when it happened to the wrong people. Maya understood the criticism, wrestled with it. In a speech at a university symposium on racial justice, she addressed it directly. "I am privileged. My father's wealth gave me a platform that others don't have, and that privilege is exactly why I have an obligation to use it. Not to center my story, but to amplify the stories of those who are silenced. My experience was traumatic. but it was also temporary. For too many people, the discrimination I faced for 90 minutes is their daily reality. That's what we're fighting to change. It was a tightrope walk, acknowledging her privilege while refusing to minimize her pain, accepting responsibility while demanding change. She didn't get it right every time, but she kept trying. 3 years after the Denver incident, skyward, Airlines held a press conference. Dr. Keisha Williams, who'd been brought in as interim CEO during the crisis, had been made permanent. Under her leadership, the airline had implemented every reform she'd promised, and then some. Bias training, independent oversight, transparent reporting of discrimination complaints, a passenger bill of rights that explicitly prohibited racial profiling. The changes were real, measurable. The company had gone from industry pariah to cautious model for how corporations could address systemic bias. But the cost had been staggering. 3 years of boycotts, lawsuits, and lost revenue had pushed Skyward to the brink of bankruptcy. They'd been forced to sell assets, lay off thousands of employees, and accept a buyout from a larger carrier just to survive. At the press conference, Dr. Williams was asked if the reforms had been worth it. She didn't hesitate. Absolutely, because the alternative was continuing to profit from discrimination, and that's not a business model any company should accept. A reporter in the back raised their hand. Do you think Maya Thornton would be satisfied with these changes? Dr. Williams smiled. I don't know, but I hope she'd see them as a beginning, not an end. Maya herself had become something of a legend in tech circles. At 22, she'd graduated from Stanford with highest honors. Her Equity Lens protocol had been licensed to 4 major airlines, 2 hotel chains, and a rideshare company. The system had flagged over 12,000 incidents of potential discrimination in its first year of operation, leading to hundreds of investigations and dozens of policy changes. But Maya wasn't satisfied. She'd started her own company, Thornton Analytics, a tech startup focused on building AI tools to detect and prevent bias in automated systems. The company's mission statement was simple. Technology should serve justice, not perpetuate injustice. She'd raised $80 million in Series A funding. Her board included civil rights leaders, tech innovators, and ethicists. She was 22 years old and already being profiled in Forbes, Wired, and Fast Company as one of the most influential voices in ethical AI. In an interview with 60 Minutes, the host asked her the question everyone wanted answered. Do you think about that day on the plane? Does it still haunt you? Maya was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Every day, she said finally. Not because I'm traumatized, though there was trauma, but because I know it's still happening. Right now, somewhere, someone is sitting in a seat they paid for, being treated like they don't belong. And most of them don't have a father who can shut down an airport. They don't have lawyers and publicists and resources. They just have to accept it. That's what haunts me. Not what happened to me, but what's still happening to others. Your father's response was extreme, the host pressed. Some have called it reckless. Do you agree? Maya's expression hardened slightly. My father did what any parent would do if they had the power. He protected his child. And yes, he broke rules. He paid for it. But those rules exist in a system that was already broken. So when people ask if his response was extreme, I ask them, is it extreme to demand that your daughter be treated like a human being? The interview went viral. Again. Maya was back in the national conversation. Again. She'd learned to live with the spotlight. But she'd never learned to like it. Before we reach the end of this story, I want to ask you something. If you could speak to Patricia Langford today, what would you say to her? Because accountability isn't just about punishment. It's about transformation. And we all have to decide what we believe that looks like. 5 years after the incident, Maya received an unexpected letter. It came to her company's office address, forwarded through 3 different channels to protect the sender's identity. The return address was a P.O. box in Montana. No name. Maya almost didn't open it. She'd received enough hate mail over the years to be cautious. But something made her curious. The letter was handwritten, 3 pages. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain. Dear Miss Thornton, you don't know me, though I suspect you know who I am. I'm writing this letter not to seek forgiveness, I don't deserve that, but to take responsibility. 5 years ago, on a flight from Denver to San Francisco, I made a decision that changed both our lives. I saw you sitting in a seat near me, and I was afraid. Not because of anything you did, but because of who I was. A woman raised in spaces where people who looked like you were servants, not equals. A woman who'd spent decades absorbing prejudice so subtle I didn't even recognize it as hate. I told myself I was being cautious, vigilant, protecting myself and other passengers. But I was lying. I was being racist. And my lie set off a chain of events that humiliated you, traumatized you, and exposed you to scrutiny and danger you never asked for. I've spent the last 5 years in therapy, working to understand the depth of my bias. I've read books, attended workshops, volunteered with civil rights organizations. I've lost my marriage, my social standing, my sense of identity. And I don't tell you this to gain sympathy. I tell you this because you deserve to know that your experience changed me. Not just because of the public consequences, but because I finally understood the harm I'd caused. I will never contact you again. I will never ask you for forgiveness or reconciliation. This letter is simply an acknowledgement. You were right. I was wrong. And I'm spending the rest of my life trying to be better. I'm sorry. Patricia Langford. Maya read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. She didn't respond, didn't acknowledge it publicly, didn't offer forgiveness or condemnation. She simply let it exist as what it was, an imperfect attempt at accountability from an imperfect person. Later that night, she called her father. "Dad, you got a minute?" "For you, always. What's going on?" "I got a letter today. From Patricia Langford." Silence on the other end. Then, "What did it say?" Maya summarized it, keeping her voice neutral. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. "Nothing. There's nothing to do." She said what she needed to say. Whether it's genuine or performative, whether it changes anything, that's not for me to decide. You're wise beyond your years, baby girl. I learned from the best. Marcus's voice softened. I've been thinking about that day a lot lately. The runway. The fine. All of it. And I keep asking myself if I'd do it again. Would you? In a heartbeat. But I also wonder if I handled it the right way. If there was a path that didn't involve shutting down an airport and making you the center of a national firestorm. Maya smiled, even though he couldn't see her. Dad, you did what you thought was right in the moment. You protected me. You held people accountable. And yeah, it was messy. But sometimes justice is messy. You're going to change the world, Maya. You already are. We're changing it together, Dad. That's the whole point. The legacy of that single moment, 90 minutes on a plane, 10 minutes on a runway, rippled outward in ways that couldn't be fully measured. Skyward Airlines became a case study in business schools about crisis management and corporate accountability. Thornton Analytics became a blueprint for ethical tech development. The Thornton Initiative for Travel Equality helped thousands of people fight discrimination and win. But perhaps the most significant impact was the quietest. In airports across the country, in hotels and restaurants and stores, employees began to pause before making assumptions, to question their biases, to remember the girl who was thrown off a plane and the father who stopped the world to defend her. It didn't end discrimination. Nothing could do that overnight. But it shifted the conversation. It made people aware. It forced institutions to confront the systems they'd built. And sometimes, awareness is where change begins. 10 years after the incident, Maya Thornton stood on a stage at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. She was 30 years old now, CEO of a company valued at over $1 billion, a voice in the national conversation about technology, justice, and equity. But standing on that stage, looking out at an audience of activists, students, and everyday people fighting for change, she felt like that 19-year-old girl again, scared, angry, determined. The museum had invited her to give the keynote address at their annual symposium. The theme, From Personal Pain to Collective Power. Maya took a breath and began. "I want to tell you about the worst 90 minutes of my life," she said, "and how they became the foundation for everything I've built since." She told the story, the flight, Patricia Langford, the removal, the humiliation, her father's jet on the runway, the chaos that followed. The audience was silent, riveted. "For a long time," Maya continued, "I thought that day was about me and my father, about a billionaire using his power to protect his daughter. And on one level it was. But I've come to understand it was about something bigger. It was about a system that has always valued certain bodies over others, certain voices over others, certain lives over others." She paused, letting the words settle. "My father had power, and he used it. But power isn't just about money or private jets. Power is about refusing to accept injustice. It's about standing up even when the cost is high. It's about using whatever platform you have, whether it's $1 billion or a Twitter account or a voice in a room, to demand better." She looked directly into the cameras recording the speech. "That woman on the plane, Patricia Langford, she made a choice rooted in fear and prejudice. The flight attendant and the supervisor made choices rooted in policy and liability. The passengers who watched me get removed made a choice to stay silent. And all of those choices, individually small, created a system of harm. But we all have choices. We can choose to speak up when we see injustice. We can choose to examine our own biases. We can choose to build systems that serve humanity instead of oppressing it. The question isn't whether you have power. We all do. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" The applause was thunderous, standing ovation. But Maya barely heard it, because in the front row, she saw her father, Marcus Thornton, now in his 60s but still commanding presence and dignity. He had tears running down his face. After the speech, they stood together in a quiet hallway backstage. "I'm so proud of you," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for what you've built, but for who you are." Maya hugged him tight. "I wouldn't be here without you, Dad. You showed me what it means to fight back. I showed you what it means to love fiercely. You showed the world what it means to transform pain into purpose." They stood there for a long moment, father and daughter, warriors in the long battle for justice. "Do you ever regret it?" Maya asked quietly. "The runway, the fine, all of it?" Marcus pulled back and looked at her with eyes that had seen decades of struggle and triumph. "Not for a single second," he said. "You were worth every penny, every consequence, every moment, and I'd do it all again tomorrow if I had to." The story of Maya Thornton and the runway that stopped the world became legend. It was told in classrooms and boardrooms, referenced in legislation and legal briefs, Immortalized in documentaries and think pieces, it became a shorthand for the intersection of privilege, power, and justice. But for Maya, it was never just a story. It was a scar, a teacher, a reminder. She carried it with her into every boardroom where she was the only black woman. Every algorithm she designed to detect bias. Every speech she gave about the responsibility of power. Every mentorship session with young women of color trying to navigate spaces that weren't built for them. The incident didn't define her, but it sharpened her, and in the years that followed, she used that sharpness to cut through systems of oppression with precision and purpose. Somewhere in Montana, Patricia Langford lived a quiet life, far from the spotlight that had once destroyed her. She volunteered at a local community center. She attended anti-racism workshops. She'd never remarried. She lived alone with her regrets and her determination to be better. Every year, on the anniversary of the incident, she made a donation to the Thornton Initiative for Travel Equality. Anonymous, modest, an ongoing act of contrition that would never erase her harm, but might, in some small way, contribute to healing. She never reached out to Maya again. She understood that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. But she'd changed, imperfectly, incompletely, but genuinely, and perhaps that was its own kind of justice. Jennifer Marks, the flight attendant, never recovered professionally. She'd left the industry entirely, working a series of low-wage jobs before eventually finding work as a teacher's aide in a small rural school district. The change had been humbling, humiliating even. But in that humble space, she'd learned something she'd never understood before: empathy. She worked with students who were struggling, students who were different, students who didn't fit the mold. And she saw in their faces the fear and confusion she'd once caused in Maya Thornton's. She couldn't undo her past, but she could choose differently moving forward. And that, too, was a kind of justice. Stephen Morrison remained bitter. He'd never accepted responsibility for his role in the incident. He'd never acknowledged that his decision to remove Maya was rooted in anything other than procedure. He lived with the conviction that he'd been wronged, made a scapegoat for a system that had failed him. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps systems do fail individuals, but individuals also uphold systems. And Stephen had made a choice. He lived with the consequences of that choice, whether he accepted them or not. The larger systems, the airlines, the airports, the policies, changed slowly, glacially. But they changed. Because of Maya, because of Marcus, because of the thousands of people who'd experienced similar discrimination and finally had a language and a platform to name it. Change is never as fast or as complete as we want it to be. But it happens. One policy at a time. One conversation at a time. One choice at a time. This story began with a moment of casual cruelty in Seat 12A. It became a nationwide reckoning. It's a story about the abuse of power. But more importantly, it's a story about the use of power. About a father's fierce, unyielding love. About a daughter's courage to transform trauma into purpose. About the choices we all make when confronted with injustice. It reminds us that for every act of prejudice, there is potential for an act of profound resistance. It shows us that one voice, amplified by courage and conviction, can change the world. Maya Thornton's story forced an entire industry to look in the mirror and confront the biases hiding in plain sight. But this isn't just a story about one family. It's about the silent injustices that millions face every day in airports, in stores, in schools, in workplaces. It's about the exhausting, relentless work of existing in spaces that weren't designed for you. It's about the price of demanding dignity, and it's about the power of refusing to accept anything less. So here's my question for you. What would you have done? If you'd been on that plane, watching Maya get removed, would you have spoken up? If you had the power Marcus had, would you have used it the same way? And if you've ever witnessed something like this, stayed silent when you could have spoken, what will you do differently next time? These aren't easy questions. They require us to examine ourselves honestly, to admit our failures and commit to doing better. But they're the questions we have to ask if we're serious about change. Thank you for watching this story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough to make it to the end. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think differently about power, privilege, and justice, I need you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button. It helps this story reach more people. And this is a story that needs to be heard. Second, share this video. Send it to someone who needs to see it. Post it on your social media. Start conversations. Because change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when stories spread and people are forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Third, subscribe to Justice Stories. We're building a community here dedicated to telling the stories that matter, the ones that challenge us, inspire us, and demand that we be better. We've got more stories like Maya's coming. Stories of courage, resistance, and the relentless pursuit of justice. And finally, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what part of this story hit you the hardest? What did it make you think about? Have you experienced something similar? Have you witnessed it? What are you going to do differently moving forward? Your voice matters. Your story matters. And together, we can create the kind of world where no one has to face what Maya faced, where no parent has to shut down an airport to protect their child, where dignity is a given, not a privilege. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for caring about justice. And thank you for believing that change is possible. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep fighting, keep speaking up, keep demanding better, because that's how we change the world, one story at a time.